Hi, welcome to episode 5 of this tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to fetch additional data from the movie API. Instead of just the poster paths, we're going to get overviews, titles, dates, ratings, YouTube links, a bunch of stuff from the movie API, and also reviews. And then we're going to use intents to move that into a detail activity, so when you select one of the movies in the grid view, you can find more details about it. We're going to use arrays to store all this information, just like we used an array. Posters, an array list, to store the strings of all the poster paths. An array list to store the strings of all the favorited poster paths, which is just an empty array list right now. We're going to create a couple more array lists. So the comments for each movie will be an array list of an array list, because the first array list represents every single movie, the second array list represents each individual comment within the movie, or review for the movie. We're going to have, and this is going to be a boolean, an array list for favorited. For each movie, it's going to have the boolean of true or false for favorited. Before we implement anything about favoriting into our app, all of these are just going to be false. And we have, of course, the overviews for each movie, the titles, the ratings. We're going to try to get 2 YouTube links for each movie. And to get to the comments and the YouTube links, we have to get the movie ID. Alright, so what are we going to do with all this information? Well, we're going to pass it into an intent, into the new detail activity. So right here is the grid view on item click listener when one of the movie posters is clicked. And first thing we're going to do is just populate that array list favorited and just make every single one in here false for now. So none of the movies will be favorited at first. We're going to create this detail activity.java in a second. It's actually detail activity.class. course, we're going to pass our poster path in. Comments. Comments or reviews are the same thing. Okay, let's create this detail activity now. So we're going to create the detail activity now. We've already done this, created a new activity, the fragment. Call it detail activity. And it automatically generates the fragment for us, right here. So that's good. But what do we have to do? We have to set that fragment. Let's look at our, not this activity. On create, we have to set that fragment to this activity. And there we have it. Now we have to get all this additional information from the API. And this actually, you can figure out how to do this on your own because we already got the poster paths. So getting the rest of the information is very similar. Now I'm going to do it in case you get stuck, but I strongly recommend trying to do this on your own and see if you can. Just follow the same method we used to get all the poster paths, to parse the JSON data, to get the titles, the dates, the ratings. Because let's look at the JSON data. We have our poster path here. Now if we just change one part of that parsing to get the release date, for example, instead of the poster path, then we got that. Then we need to get the IDs to get the comments and the YouTube links. So that's a little more complicated, but I'm going to do all of it in a second. So where is our JSON string? Where is this giant JSON string located in our code? If you remember correctly, this JSON result is that giant JSON string. So now we're going to parse it for additional information. We're going to create the new method, get strings from JSON. And this other second parameter we're going to pass into this method is overview, because over here, this is titled overview. And just copy and paste this a couple times. This is our original title because over here, the string is our original title. The rating is named vote average. And the IDs are used to get the comments and the YouTube links. So the get strings from JSON method is going to be very similar to the get paths from JSON method, except we're going to have two parameters. Let's just copy everything in this method and modify it slightly. Instead of getting the poster path, we're going to get the second param. So whatever is passed up here, instead of getting the poster paths, we'll be getting the overview, original title, vote average, release date, etc., etc. Now we'll have one exception for this. If the param is vote average or rating, we don't want to get a string, we want to get a number. And then convert that to a string and add out of 10 to it. So this is how we get all of this information, but what about the YouTube links and the comments? Well, we're going to use the IDs to get the YouTube links and the comments. Now for the YouTube links, we're going to do something interesting. The calls to get the YouTube links returns inconsistent data. Like every time you call to get the two YouTube links, sometimes randomly, it will return null instead of the actual link. And the entire array won't be null, but one or two elements of it will be null. It's very inconsistent. So to do that, we're going to put it in a loop and continue calling it until we get a very solid call. So we're going to continue calling the API to get the YouTube links until one of the cases is where there are two or less null returned. Oh. Going to create this new method in a second. So we're going to loop through both arrays, YouTube and YouTube's2, and count how many nulls there are, because it varies on every call. And if there are more than two nulls, the infinite loop will continue. If there are less than two nulls, then that's fine. That's good enough for us. We'll break the loop. So if one of the elements is null, we're going to replace it with no video found. Instead of the YouTube ID, we'll just have no video found. So now we're going to loop through the second one, the second YouTube array list. And then of course, if the null count, if going through both YouTube array lists finds two or more nulls, or more than two nulls, we're going to continue the infinite loop. If not, we're going to break out of the loop, because our data is solid enough for this app. And we're going to make this method in a second too. So let's make the get YouTubes from IDs method. We have to make a separate call to the API with the movie ID to get the YouTube links. position parameter is to determine if you want to get the first YouTube link or the second YouTube link. Oops. So just like we made a call to the API earlier with the URL, we're just going to do the same thing for the get that we did in the get paths from API. We'll just copy all of this over. Except instead of doing two different calls based on sort by popularity, our URL string is going to be one set string. And it's going to be slightly different. Instead of discovering movies, we're just going to go to one specific movie. Add in our ID into our query. Going to add a loop at the top here. We'll take this while loop out. Just makes things more unnecessarily complicated. Here's our JSON result. When we make this call, this is what we get. Put this in a try catch. We're going to make this method in a second. we're going to catch all the other exceptions that could be thrown. And then close the connection in the finally block. Actually, we can just copy this closing connection code. There we go. So let's make this get YouTube from JSON method. The result default will be no videos found. So if the position equals 0, which means we're trying to get the first YouTube video link for the movie. And in the call, the ID for the YouTube video is called key. If there is more than one YouTube video, if the length of the YouTube's array is greater than 1, then we'll set it to the second YouTube video in the call. If not, we'll just set it to the same as the first video. So we wired up everything to get the YouTube video. The 2 YouTube videos we need for each movie. Now we're going to do something similar to get the comments or the reviews for each movie. So let's create the get reviews from IDs. Once again, we have to copy all this code because we're opening up another connection. Let's make the method. Let's just copy that over. Now our URL string to get the comments will be slightly different again. We'll start the same way. Actually, let's just copy the whole thing. But instead of videos, we'll make that reviews. We'll just copy the YouTube code over and change a couple things, since it's a very similar concept, opening and closing the connection. Here's our JSON result. This will have all the comments for the movies. This will be a JSON string containing all the reviews for each movie. And because our results is an array list within an array list, this get comments from JSON method will return an array list. And we'll make that method in a second, and we'll be done. Here in the exception, just in case an exception is caught here, we're going to continue the outer loop that we defined earlier. So we're just going to try again if an exception is caught. Let's make our final method get comments from JSON. very similar to all the other get something from JSON methods. Except this one is returning an array list of strings. Whereas other ones like this YouTube method is just returning a single string. If, of course, the length of the array is 0, then there will only be one review returned, and the name of that review will be, or what's in that review will just be no reviews found for this movie. So we'll loop through the entire JSON string and add all the reviews to our results array list. There we have it. Now let's check. If our we're not doing anything with all this data we're getting yet. We're going to do that in the next episode to populate the detail activity. But let's check that we go into the detail activity when we click. When we click on one of the items in the grid view. If you enjoyed this video and if you're learning from this, be sure to like and subscribe. And hopefully you're understanding what's going on in this code. Maybe even to the point where you were able to code some of it without watching me. That would be ideal. We're just repeating different versions of what we've already done in previous episodes. The only thing new in this episode is adding the intent to the new activity. This phone takes a while to connect to the internet. There we go. Just make sure no exceptions are thrown. Oh, and an exception is thrown. looks like the fragment's already automatically put into the XML, which means we don't need to put this code here. But if we want to do it the old-fashioned way, like we did for the main activity, just copy over this frame layout. Instead of main activity, detail activity. And we'll change this to container detail. And here we're going to be adding this to container detail. Let's try that again. It should just say hello world when you click on one of them. Okay, there we go. Alright, so in the next episode we're going to populate this detail activity with all the movie detail information we just got in this episode. Thanks for watching, I'll see you soon.